What if all of the difference and separation that we see around us, the separation between you and me, between mind and body, are all just illusions that our minds have created? Well, that's a question that thinkers have been considering for thousands of years, leading to a philosophical and spiritual tradition that we refer to today as non-dualism. And that's what I want to explore in this video today. We'll be looking at the origins of non-dualism, the implications of it, and ultimately how non-dualist philosophy can profoundly transform the way that we see the world. I'm Dr. Alan Johnson, and on this channel I talk about the mind, well-being, productivity, and change for thinkers, makers, and everyone in between. If we break down the word non-dualism, we see non-dual, not two. And that's really what it is, a philosophy that there is no fundamental separation in reality. There are not two or more things, there is only the one thing. A simple analogy that we can use to clarify this is like waves on the surface of the ocean. Even though the waves look like they are separate, they're doing something different than the ocean, we know that they are not separate to the ocean. They are just one expression of the ocean. The waves and the ocean are not two different things. They are fundamentally the same. And non-dualism points toward the unity that exists between all apparent dualities, between the waves and the ocean, between self and others, between inner and outer, and between the spiritual and material. And this type of thinking has emerged throughout history in a number of different ways, at places around the world and in different spiritual traditions. In Hinduism, in a particular branch of Hinduism called Advaita Vedanta, there is a really strong focus on the unity of Atman, or the self, and Brahman, or the ultimate reality. We also see something similar in Buddhism, where the concept of sunyata, or emptiness, alerts us to the interdependent nature of all phenomenon. And we see that most specifically in branches of Zen Buddhism. But we see non-dualist thinking in Western spiritual traditions as well, in Neoplatonism, in the Christian mysticism of Meister Eckhart and others. And non-dualist philosophy, even though it seems to be spread out across time and across the world, seems to share one thing in common: a belief that separation is an illusion of the mind. Now, we probably have experienced little flashes of this, particularly when we're in flow state, when we feel so caught up or so involved in the thing that we're doing that we lose a sense of being separate from the thing. For those of us who practice yoga or meditation or other forms of spiritual practice, we might also have entered into non-dual states from time to time. And it's important to point out that non-dual awareness is something that is experiential rather than intellectual. So this video today is talking about the history and theory of non-dualist philosophy, but it doesn't evoke an experience of non-dual awareness. That's something that is very, very different and will emerge in different sorts of ways. You ultimately cannot grasp non-dualist philosophy with the mind. To return to the metaphor of the ocean, it's kind of like trying to scoop up the entirety of the ocean in a sand bucket. It is just not going to happen. So how do we create or facilitate these moments of non-dual awareness? Well, that's what spiritual and philosophical teachers have been attempting to help us to do for thousands of years. The 20th century spiritual teacher, Ramana Maharshi, really focused on this and used the contemplative question of who am I to help support his students to break down that barrier between self and other, inviting his students to repeatedly ask the question, who am I? Moving further and further inward to that point of non-dual awareness, to a recognition, perhaps, that I am not different to anyone else. we see this movement toward, or the signposting of non-dual awareness in other contemporary spiritual practices as well, such as mindfulness meditation, of course, where we practice observing thoughts, emotions, and sensations without labeling them or judging them. We begin to recognize and inhabit that observer self within us as a way to move towards, a little bit closer toward, that sense of non-dual awareness. We can also claim a sense of non-dual awareness through a recognition of the sacred in the ordinary, our gratitude practices, when we are simply expressing gratitude for the beautiful sunset or the beautiful trees around us or the great cup of tea. If we develop that practice over time, we begin to notice how we no longer see a separation between ourselves and that object of gratitude. That's the real point of gratitude practices, to begin to recognize that that object that we are grateful for is inherently the same as us. We are recognizing our divinity in something outside of ourselves as well. And this is what relationships are for as well. And I'll be doing a whole video series on that coming up really soon. There's a number of common misconceptions that come up when it comes to non-dual philosophy. Number one is this view that non-dualism is a form of nihilism or existentialism, really significant philosophical themes that were shaping the 20th century. But non-dualism doesn't deny reality, but points toward a deeper unity behind it. So in many ways, we can't be nihilists to practice non-dual philosophy, because we need to recognize that there has to be a material world that is unified with the world of thoughts and spirits as well. That might begin to sound like a bit of a religious or a spiritual statement, which leads to the second major misconception of non-dualism, that it is a belief system or a spiritual system of some sort. So even though non-dualist philosophy has appeared in nearly all of the world's religious traditions, in itself, it isn't a religious system, or it's not even necessarily a spiritual system, because it's not about adopting new beliefs. If we think about a religion or a spiritual system as taking on new beliefs, non-dualism is really about letting go of the frameworks that we have inherited. And this is why non-dualist philosophy tends to be embedded within the inner or the esoteric teachings of spiritual traditions and religious traditions around the world, because you need to, first of all, inhabit the religious tradition as it's shared publicly, before you can then recognize that that is only pointing you toward a richer and deeper and more nuanced truth about the matter of the world around us. And the third misconception that often comes up is non-dualism is not just a form of passive detachment. We think that non-dualist philosophy just removes us from the world and causes us to stop caring about the significance of our relationships or our safety or our comfort or peace within our own communities and in the wider world. That's not the case at all, because practicing non-dualist philosophy will inevitably be leading to a greater sense of compassion and engagement with the world. Yes, a practice of non-dualist philosophy changes our relationship to the world, but it does not remove us from that world. And in many ways, it enables us to show up even more powerfully and authentically to create a better world for ourselves and those around us. We don't talk about non-dualist philosophy all that much today, but I think that we really need to, because I think that non-dualist philosophy is going to be essential to help us understand and then overcome the major challenges that we face in our world today, overcoming the many divisions that we see in the pages of newspapers and blogs, cultural divisions, political, personal divisions, healing that sense of alienation and disconnection which we have taken with us from the late 20th century, and through which the impacts of COVID-19 and social distancing seems to have intensified even further. And with the rise of generative AI, humans are going to have to come into an even clearer relationship with what is self and what is other. So returning to and studying deeply the tenets of nondual philosophy seems more important today than it ever has been before. Non-dualist philosophy isn't something to believe in. It's something to experience. And I'll put up links to some other videos on this channel where we look at this in more detail. You can begin really simply with this today, just by noticing those moments and looking out for those moments when you seem to feel connected to the world around you, when those boundaries seem to have dissolved. Maybe it's when you're walking down the street and see a beautiful sunset, or maybe it's when you see a friend or partner after a long separation. These moments are around us all the time. And as we study non-dualist philosophy more and learn from its teachings, we will increasingly discover the impact of these beautiful moments of connection that are around us all the time. And I have no doubt that there are some people in your life who will benefit from this type of thinking and this philosophical framework. So in addition to liking and sharing this video, send this on to those friends. Get them involved in this conversation. And in the comments below, share your thoughts with me about what do you think about non-dual philosophy? What are your questions, your concerns, your worries about pursuing this philosophical tradition more? Because on this channel, there's going to be a lot more to come and a lot more for us to explore together in the world of non-dual philosophy.